morning, everybody. I got suckered into introducing one of my favorite people. If y'all don't know me, I'm Jerry Moore. I'm the Southwest Regional Coordinator with the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth. And I don't like being up in public in front of everybody, so I'm just going to have at it, y'all. I'm going to introduce Richard Kennedy. He's our Executive Director for TCCY. Joining him will be Rose Naccarato, who is also, I don't remember her title. She's our data expert, and that's enough said on that one. Richard was appointed to be TCCY Executive Director beginning June 16, 2018. Kennedy began with the agency in 2000 as an ombudsman, and he served as the Associate Director of the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth since January 2011. He was promoted to Director of Field Operations before becoming Associate Director. Kennedy has spent his entire professional career working directly with and advocating for children and youth. Prior to joining state government, Kennedy worked with Davidson County Community Services Agency, Camelot, Hermitage Hall, and the Greater New Orleans Area Council on Boy Scouts of America. A native of Middle Tennessee, even though we won't hold that against him, Kennedy holds a Bachelor's of Art degree in Political Science from Lambuth University in Jackson. So his love for Jackson runs deep. And a Master's of Art degree in Counseling from Trevecca University in Nashville, Tennessee. Kennedy is an alumnus of Lead Tennessee, Tennessee Government Management Institute, and Tennessee Government Executive Institute. He is an inaugural member of the Tennessee Government Leadership Council. His involvement in the community includes having recently completed his final term on the Board of Directors for Prevent Child Abuse Tennessee, where he served as board director in 2015 and 2016. He has also volunteered as a Big Brother with Big Brothers and Big Sisters of Nashville. So he's going to come up today and tell us more about our State of the Child report that you have in front of you. And Rose is going to help him explain break down some of that data. So help me welcome Richard and Rose.
Appreciate it. I wish I had it in our budget to be able to give her an extra check for saying all of those nice things, but she really did make me sound much more important and accomplished than I am. So thank you, Jerry. It's my pleasure to have Dr. Rose Naccarato on stage with me. And so I am very much a storyteller, so I'm going to tell you guys stories as I talk, because I'm afraid I'm going to bore you to tears with lots of data. So years ago, when I had the opportunity to be promoted to our Director of Field Operations at the Commission, I was young. I was a much younger man, and I had never, ever supervised a team of people before. So I was already intimidated about supervising folks, but I was even more intimidated by the fact that the people I was going to be supervising were highly skilled, highly successful people who had been doing the work for a long time. And so at that time, the person that was Jerry's counterpart and Dana's counterpart in Chattanooga was sitting at the table beside me. And so she patted my hand, and she leaned over and she said, "Do you want me to tell you how to be wildly successful?" And I said, "Yes, please." And she said, "Shut up and do what we say." And I said, "You know what? I can do that. I can make that happen." So I am so incredibly fortunate to work with some of the best and brightest people in the state of Tennessee and in state government. And Dr. Rose Naccarato, who is our Director of Data Communication and Impact, has agreed to be here with me, because my fear is you are going to ask a way down in the weeds data methodology question that I'm just not going to be able to answer. And then instead of saying, "I don't know, and I'll have to get back to you," Rose can be here to be able to handle that on the spot for us. So there are a couple of things that I want to accomplish with my time with you guys as I set my timer. First, I kind of want to provide a real quick overview of what the Commission on Children and Youth is, how we fit within state government, and really how we work to support all of the efforts that are happening across the state to improve outcomes for our children, youth, and families. The second thing that I want to do is I'm really thinking about this as far as funneling down. So I want to talk about the national kids count work and how Tennessee compares to other states in the country. The next thing that I want to accomplish, and where I'll spend a little bit more time, is really around how our children are doing in Tennessee in a variety of different domains, and a lot of data that we've seen that was included in the last 2021 State of the Child report. And then finally, we're going to funnel all the way down to Madison County specifically, and the Madison County profile, and the data that was looked at and analyzed that led to Madison County being in the 95th spot. So Rose is going to tackle that part because she and her team really did the county profiles. And so they're going to be able to, she will be able to explain some things in a little bit more of a data lens than what I have the skills to do. I think before I start that, one of the things that's really important for me to say and for you guys to continue to hear throughout the course of the day is no one wants to be in a 95th out of a 95th spot out of 95 options. That stings. That hurts. That's frustrating. It's all of the things that Mayor Conger said. It's all of the things that I know that I've heard Matt Marshall talk about. And being at the table with so many of you all, I know that hurts. But what I don't want you to lose sight of is there are a lot of really good things that are happening in Madison County, in Jackson. Just down the street a little bit, you guys are having some of the biggest investment in the state history that is going to change this part of the world for generations to come. So as you hear this data, I don't want you, or it is my hope, that you don't sit there and think, gosh, I've been working towards eliminating this or improving this for 15 years and I haven't gotten anywhere. I'm going to throw my hands up and go home. I don't want you to do that. I want you to kind of double down. I want you to think about the successes that you've had, and then I want you to think about the opportunities that you guys may have to work together in ways that you haven't been before, or in ways that you think, hey, this may work, it may not, but let's give things a shot. So I will say, and as Jerry said, Jackson holds a really special place in my heart. And so had the opportunity to see Carrie Vaughn, who I went to Lambeth with, and we were talking about the fact that whenever we're in Jackson, regardless of what's happening, he feels the need to drive through campus. And I said, you know, it's really interesting because after dinner last night, I dropped Rose off at the hotel and said, hey, I need to drive through campus just to check on things. And so the 4 years that I was able to, well, really 4 years and one semester, I was able to spend at Lambeth truly were some of the most perfect years of my life. But even more than that, I think being a part of that college, university at that time really instilled this sense of, you know, when great opportunities are given to you, then there's great responsibility that comes along with that to use what you've learned to make the world a better place. So I hope that my 4 years in Jackson at least make me an honorary Jacksonian, and that I hope that I do the school and the community proud through the work that we try to accomplish every single day. All right, so the Commission on Children and Youth. So we are a part of state government. We are a part of the executive branch of state government. We are an independent state agency. So independent looks a little bit different for us in that we are not like the big cabinet level agencies like the Department of Health or the Department of Transportation or the Department of Children's Services. So in those big departments, the governor has the opportunity or the responsibility to appoint a commissioner that will provide leadership and guide those departments. With us being a commission, we're structured a little bit differently in that the governor appoints 21 people to serve as commission members of the commission. There are certain criteria that have to be met with those appointments, but I really kind of want you to think kind of like board of directors for an organization. So even though we're a part of the executive branch, I am not hired and fired by the governor. Instead, I'm hired and fired by that 21-member commission. One of one of the criteria for the commission members is that we have to have one commission member from each of the state's 9 development districts. So we are so incredibly fortunate and thankful that from Jackson we have Amy Jones. All of you know Amy, I'm sure, with juvenile court, and Amy just does a fantastic job of helping us think through the work that we do and providing that broad policy guidance and direction for the agency. We're also very fortunate that we have Mayor Alan Strabinsky out of Stanton, who also serves as one of the commission members as well. So as I said a little bit earlier, there are a couple of goals that I have for us. So we're gonna filter down. So we're gonna talk about the national rank. We're going to talk about the 2021 State of the Child Report, and then we're going to talk about Madison County's profile, or Rose is going to talk about Madison County's profile with you all. So about 32 years ago, children's advocates across the country said, we're doing a lot of work in our states, but we don't really know how we're comparing to other states. So how do our children in Tennessee do compared to children in Arkansas? Or how do our children do compared to children in Alabama, Mississippi, Kentucky, North Carolina, any of our bordering states? But even more than that, what are the states that are doing the best job for children, investments, outcomes, things like that, and what can we learn from those states? So the Annie E. Casey Foundation is a foundation that's headquartered in Baltimore, Maryland, and I'm always hesitant to say this in Tennessee, especially this close to Memphis, but the Casey Foundation is the UPS family. So Jim Casey, the founder of UPS, grew up really in some pretty dire circumstances and lots of poverty, and just worked really hard to found UPS and grow it to what it is today. And so children's issues were really important, and improving those outcomes were really important to him as a person, and therefore the foundation that was created really kind of started to fill that space of investing dollars into those areas. So when the Casey Foundation rolled out the National Kids Count Project, they really did it in three kind of cycles. So Tennessee was the second cohort of states that was chosen to participate. So since that point in time at the Commission on Children and Youth, we've been the Annie E. Casey Foundation's Kids Count partner in Tennessee. So what that looks like, and all of this lives in Dr. Naccarato's shop, is she and her team work with every state department with as many data sources as possible to collect and compile and share all of Tennessee's data with the foundation so that they can do the analysis to see how we're doing compared to other states. Part of the statute that creates the Commission on Children and Youth requires us to do an annual State of the Child in Tennessee report. So we use the same indicators that the Casey Foundation uses at the national level to really look at how we are doing in the state. So in 2021, Tennessee ranked 36th nationally. So the 4 indicators, again, that are looked at are economic well-being, education, health, and then family and community. No one in this room is sitting here going, yay, we are 36th. But I will tell you that there are days, and there have been times, where we're like, yay, we're 36th. Because for the first probably 20 years of the Kids Count work, we were in the 40s. And so for us, moving to the 30s is a significant accomplishment in the state. And I think there are several things that have led to where we are with that. Now, the hard part with this as well is that no state is happy where they are. So even if they're number 4, they're not happy that they're number 4. They want to be number 1. If they're 50th, they're certainly not happy with 50th. They want to be further up in the pack. So it's really difficult for states to leapfrog from 36th to 5th or 36th to 10 because we're all rowing as hard as we can statewide and as a country in those directions. So I'm going to switch gears because I really want to spend more time talking about our kids in Tennessee and so how our kids are doing. So in the 2021 State of the Child Report, there are several topics that are included in that report. So in the circle that's on the left, there's a lot of focus that's placed on looking at the demographics of our children, on other special topics that you'll see on the right side in kind of that gray-green box that really looks at COVID and adverse childhood experiences and youth and young adults and housing and youth justice and dental care. And so you're going to see data about that. But in the books that you have, you're going to see a lot of the information, or you're going to see the information included in that. We look at economics. We focused on education. We focused on health, and then we, as always, include a child welfare and a youth justice section as well. Now, before we get into the data even deeper, one of the things that I do want to let you all know is, and this is no surprise to you, the last couple of years have been a crazy couple of years. And so with COVID and, with just a variety of other things that are happening or have been happening in the world. So there were some challenges with the data. And so I'm going to ask Rose to correct anything that I say here. So there were some challenges receiving data from the Census Bureau. And so the Census Bureau has always been, and I think it's called the American Family Survey. American Community Survey. And so there were challenges with being able to get data from the Census Bureau as they were still analyzing from the last census. And then they were doing some odd kind of release times because they were concerned about the validity of the data as well. So this year we realized that Rose and team realized that we needed to expand the sources of data where we could to be able to get the most accurate information and the best picture of how our children and young folks are doing across the state. So I'm pleased with the report. I think they've done a stellar job with what they had, but I also want to caution that historically we've been able to look back and compare longitudinal data of saying this compared to the year before, this compared to the year before that. I would say that we need to be very careful in doing that with this data because the data sources are different. Anything that I got wrong with that? Okay. All right. So let's talk about our children. So who are our children in Tennessee? What do our children look like? So we know that out of 100 children in Tennessee, we know that 64 of those children are going to be non-Hispanic white kids. We know that 19 of those kids are going to be non-Hispanic black. We know that 10 of that 100 are going to be Hispanic or Latino. We know that 4 are going to be non-Hispanic and have 2 or more identified race groups. We know that 2 are going to be non-Hispanic Asian, and we know that 1 is going to be non-Hispanic American Indian, Alaskan Native, Native Hawaiian, or other Pacific Islander. So what we know from this and seeing who our children are and the demographics of our children, we know that Tennessee is becoming increasingly diverse. And so moving forward, what we have to look at is we have to look at how that diversity really factors into all of our decision points when it comes to systems and strategies to again, improve outcomes for children, youth, and families. In Tennessee, we know that 1 in 8 of our kids are part of an immigrant family. And of that, of those, 1 in 10 Tennessee school-age children speak another language besides English at home. All right, so kind of switching gears a little bit with some of the other indicators, specifically with the health outcomes. We know that outpatient medical visits among 3 to 5-year-olds across the country were significantly lower in 2020 when compared to a typical year. So remember where we were in 2020, I think my years running together. That was first year of COVID, first year of COVID. It seems like it just started yesterday, and then it seems like it was 100 years ago at the same time. So what you'll see is that there was a big drop of children receiving medical visits and services, or doing medical visits and services during that time. I don't think that any of us are shocked by that. I had the opportunity to go to the dentist last week, and I hate to tell you all, but it was my first teeth cleaning in 2 years, and my dentist really was like, okay, that's nasty. I'm sorry COVID happened, but you still need to come. And so I, as a moderately educated adult that is mindful of the importance of dental hygiene, if I put that off, then I certainly understand that for other families and individuals as well. So again, this is not going to come as a big surprise to any of you when we're talking about child care. We know that child care has been a challenge for the last couple of years. It was a challenge for many families even leading up to COVID. And so what we know is that over half of the parents in Tennessee experienced child care disruptions, took unpaid leave, or cut their work hours to be able to take care of their children. We know that 21% used vacation, sick days, or other paid leave. We know that 21% took unpaid leave from their jobs. We know that 35% cut their work hours. And then we know that 16% of caregivers left a job to be able to provide that child care for their children. And then 28% supervised one or more children while working. So I think for me, there are two things that really kind of stand out with that. When I look at the 16% who left a job, obviously that feeds in as a factor to be considered when we're looking at labor and staffing challenges and shortages across every industry that we could probably think of in the state. I think the other one that I realized, but that also was interesting for me, was the 28% the supervised one or more children by working. And I know that with us at the commission, and we're a small team of 30, in some ways, some of my favorite parts of those virtual meetings were when there were children that were in the background. We had one staff person at the time whose son liked to dress up like superheroes, and so we would be like in a Teams meeting, and so we would be talking, and then all of a sudden Spider-Man would come in this way, and then all of a sudden Superman would come in this way. And so for me, I thought that was adorable because I love the kid, and he's a funny little guy, and it just kind of broke up some of the tedium of the work that we were doing. But it's also really easy for me to say that that's adorable because he wasn't my child, and I wasn't trying to deal with work and handle him and all of that. Even just the other day, we were in a leadership team meeting at the commission, and so Rose was getting ready to share some information with our leadership team, and her son walked in and was like, hey, I need a password for this, this, and this. So Rose is trying to help her son and do this. So I think that like with your organizations and other places, I think we just made it work the best way that we could, but I think that all of us realize that that's just not sustainable going forward. So childcare continues to be a huge topic of conversation and a lot of opportunity for us in the state. So when we talk about economics, about how our families are doing, we know that in September of 2021, 42% of Tennessee households with children had difficulty paying for usual household expenses. That's rent, that's electricity, that's water, that's groceries, those just basic necessities to live. And that was a 12% increase from September of 2020. We know that nearly half of all Tennessee families are struggling financially, and that we know that in 2019, 1 in 4 Tennessee families were receiving financial assistance to provide for their children. So a solid 25% of our families were relying on some type of assistance to help them. So during COVID, there were several public policy strategies that were put in place to help Americans be able to weather the storm or to navigate with a little bit of kind of help or support. So one of the things that happened was that the child tax credit was extended. And so in October, we know that the child tax credit helped financially support more than 700,000 Tennessee families and ensure over 1 million children in Tennessee had their basic needs met. Again, basic needs: food, clothing, shelter. What we also know from families who benefited from that, that they spent their money on rent, on food. Vast majority spent the money on rent, on food, or on academic enrichment programs or strategies for their children. So those were some, from that data, those are some wise investments of those dollars. Now again, like I said, I have the great privilege and the great curse of living in Nashville. And I also have the great privilege and the great curse of living in East Nashville, which is kind of downtownish Nashville. So I have no shame that I will tell you all I moved to East Nashville 22 years ago when it was kind of a little bit of not sure which way this neighborhood is going to go. But I loved the neighbors, I loved the diversity of the community, and bottom line, it was really all I could afford at that time because we are certainly not going to be wealthy working for the state of Tennessee. But like a lot of other cities and communities, I have seen my neighborhood explode. And so there are just influx of folks who are moving from other states who sold their house in another state and made so much profit that they can just come pay $1 million for a house in my neighborhood that is full of 1950s grandmama brick ranch houses. So if they have it, have at it. But in saying that, that really does create challenges for other folks in our state when it comes to housing costs. So we know that almost 144,000 Tennessee extremely low-income households are spending more than half of their income on rent. We know that 1 in 5 Tennessee households with children in 2021 in August had little to no confidence in their ability to make their next housing payment on time. And of those households, over half were very or extremely likely to face eviction or foreclosure within the next 2 months. So that's pretty frightening when we think about just everything that we learned in Psychology 101 about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and housing, and that being one of the foundational elements that we need. So let's talk about education just a little bit. So with education, in 2020 and 2021, with a TN Ready testing among 3rd to 5th graders, that we know that 1 in 4 students scored on track or mastered in math. So we can flip that. We can say 1 in 4 were on track or mastered, which means 3 out of 4 weren't. 1 in 3 students scored on track or mastered in reading and language. 2 in 5 students scored on track or mastered in science. And so what you'll see on the right side of that are really just some differential breakdowns with that. And so what we know is that there is still any gain that we have in Tennessee in a category. We can look at the data lines and we can still see a gap between our white children and our children of color or other minority children, that they're just not doing as well. All right. So every table that I have the opportunity to sit at right now, and I would bet my next paycheck that it's the same way for you guys, whether we're talking about childcare, whether we're talking about housing, whether we're talking about gun issues, any topic that you can imagine, there's always going to come up this conversation of mental health right now. And that I think that we are all hearing and knowing that there are increased mental health needs for our children and for our young folks. I would go as far as to say there are increased mental health needs for our adults. And I think that we are dealing with that in a time where we're also struggling with having enough service providers to be able to meet those needs. And you guys know all too well that once we start getting into the rural parts of the state, those numbers are even less. So any of you who are doing direct mental health service to children, youth, or families right now, thank you. I could not imagine having to navigate everything that you guys are navigating and still providing that quality intervention and services to the folks who so desperately need it. So I am certain you go home at night sometime and think, what am I doing? This isn't making a difference. But I want you to know there are so many of us that sit back and admire and respect the work that you're doing every day. So don't give up on that. So during the 2021 school year, with social workers and with psychologists, we know that those national organizations they have kind of some best practices for the number of social workers or psychologists needed for students. And so what we know is that 1 in 4 districts in Tennessee met the goal of 1 certified social worker for every 1,500 students. And then a little over 1 in 3 districts met the goal of 1 certified psychologist for every 1,000 students. So what you'll see with that is we still have a lot of opportunity to provide those mental health supports to schools, to school districts, and to teachers. I do want to be very clear and express appreciation to Governor Lee, to Commissioner Marie Williams at the Department of Mental Health. They have worked tirelessly to have funding, increased funding for mental health services. And really a couple of years ago did something that is a very innovative thing, in that they created a Children's Mental Health Trust Fund. And so the revenue from that trust fund should be going back into the schools, maybe starting as early as next year with that. But so I want you to hear the good things as well as the opportunities as well. All right, so kind of switching back to childcare just a little bit, is that when we're looking at infant and early care and child care, when we think about accessibility, so we know that 48% of Tennesseans live in a child care desert. Not to insult your intelligence, but when you think desert, it is what that is. There just aren't enough spaces or slots in child care programs to be able to meet the need there. Once we get out of urban areas, or we really look at those rural areas, we see that number increase to 62% in rural areas. Again, I'm not sure that any of you are about to fall off your chair by being shocked by that, because I think you know that and see that every day. Affordability. Childcare is expensive, and so whenever I see this that Rose and team put together, it always takes my breath for a second. In that infant care in Tennessee costs more than in-state public university tuition. So it is more expensive to keep an infant in child care in Tennessee than it is to send one of our kids to the University of Tennessee for a year. So with child care, you all know as well that quality is important. So there are a variety of different ways that you can be a child care center. You can be, the favorite auntie in the neighborhood that loves kids, and the neighborhood parents say, hey, we want you to keep, 5 kids in the neighborhood and your house for the summer, and they're going to do that. We know that there are other child cares that really focus on academic enrichment and other categories as well, and that are really focused on being the highest rating that they could be. But we know that 1 in 3 child care providers in Tennessee is licensed, so 1 in 3. And then 1% of those licensed have any type of national accreditation. So that's important for us to think about as we continue to focus on improving the quality of childcare. Now, again, there's some work that's happening with the Department of Human Services, with Child Care Task Force, and really looking at that as well. I'm going to be painfully vulnerable with you guys and say that we don't have a seat on that task force, so I really can't tell you all that's going to come out of that yet. But as we learn more, we'll certainly share more as we have the opportunity. So we know in Tennessee that we have the biggest bang for our buck, for our taxpayer dollars, and being stewards of those dollars, when we invest in those strategies and efforts in children that are birth to 3, birth to 5. We know that so many of you have been through the Building Strong Brains Tennessee training. We know that you have all of the knowledge to understand kind of the importance of that investment. But that's not where we invest the majority of our dollars, and so we'll talk about that in just a second, and I need to watch this, so don't just keep talking to y'all all day. So So we know that the rate of children receiving Tennessee Early Childhood Intervention Services, TEIS, we know that that's increased from 16.7 to 33.9 per 1,000 students. And then I think that this is really important as well. And so one of the other big responsibilities that Dr. Naccarato has is that she really does the resource mapping report. And so the Commission on Children and Youth is tasked with looking at how much money we as a state spend on state dollars or on federal dollars, state dollars or federal dollars on services for children and youth. And so in that report, there's just all kinds of interesting information. But I think it's really interesting here that if we look at the estimated total spending on children under 5 years of age, it's about 13.9% of all state expenditures. But what we know is that children under the age of 5 were 27.1% of all of the children in the state. So in a perfect world, in Richard's perfect world, that investment would be mirroring the population as well. Okay, so mental health. We've talked about mental health. We've talked about the mental health challenges. And so a national organization, Mental Health America, much like the Casey Foundation, will rank the states compared to each other with how we're doing with mental health outcomes and services. So you will see that Tennessee overall ranked 34th. In our youth mental health, we were ranked 40th. In access to care, we were ranked 45th. So a piece of data that I think that is also really interesting and is very timely, especially during COVID, is looking at the data that's on the right side. So on the right side, you're going to see the two different kind of bar charts. Are those bar charts? What do they call them when they go that way? Bar charts? Anyway, the two different bar charts. So, so what you're going to see is the orange is a parent of a child, and the child does not have any type of formal mental health diagnosis. And then the blue are parents who have children who do have a formal diagnosis. And so what you're going to see is you're going to see a variety of things on the left about parents being concerned. And this was done during a Vanderbilt Child Health Policy Center pulse poll. And so these were the results of that. So I think that you're going to see, especially in the orange bars with children who do not have a diagnosis, what you're going to see is you're going to see that parents were saying, hey, I'm really concerned about my kid being stressed. I'm concerned about depression. And then if you look at the one from the bottom up, that's anxiety. So you're going to see that 21% of parents who have children who do not have a diagnosis saying, I'm really concerned about anxiety and how they are dealing with that. Suicide, you know, if we go deeper in with mental health, we know that that the number of teens who made a plan about how they would attempt suicide has increased by 50% since 2007. When we look at some data in this section, we're going to see 1 in 5 kids seriously considered suicide. 1 in 7 made a plan for how they were going to do it. 1 in 10 actually attempted, and 1 in 25 had an attempt that was serious enough that it required medical intervention. All right. Now, so one of the things, it's a good thing. So let's celebrate where we can celebrate. So we know that teen substance abuse is on the decline, and that we're doing better in Tennessee really than the national average. However, I have to balance that with some scary stuff that you guys see as well, is that we are seeing an increase in fentanyl, and then we know that fentanyl was involved in 80% of the overdoses among Tennesseans aged 15 to 24. We know that the number has increased by 230% since 2017. And so bottom with that is we see that 15% of Tennessee high school students had ridden in a car with someone who'd been drinking. But the fentanyl issue is something that really is kind of at a top of a lot of conversation with law enforcement, with district attorneys, with Tennessee's federal delegation, and with state leadership. Just probably a month ago, I had the opportunity to participate in a roundtable that was hosted by Senator Hagerty and Governor Lee, where they were really hearing this information from law enforcement and really having some conversation about strategies to be able to address that. that. So I don't think any of us would say we are where we need to be with that, but it is a topic of conversation that is happening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this because this is going to be in the book. But really, I want to use the last couple of minutes, as promised, to really talk about Madison County specifically. And I'm going to let Rose, ask Rose to handle that. But again, another point to celebrate as I'm passing off to her is that we know that community involvement and educational attainment among young adults are both at a 20-year high in Tennessee. We had more young Tennesseans vote in the last presidential election than we have in the last 25, 50 years. So civic engagement, awareness, being involved in community, we really are seeing some growth there. So that's something to be incredibly proud of. So Dr. Rose Naccarato will talk with you specifically about Madison County.
Okay. So as part of Kids Count, we look at the way they rank the states, and we decided we wanted to do something similar with the counties. And so we used the same sort of general areas. We tried to sort of pattern it after what they did. The things that they compare at the state level are not always available at the county level to compare. So we had to change them a little bit, do something a little different, but we got as close as we could. So these same sets of indicators, economic well-being, family and community, health, and education, those are the 4 domains they do. We did that as well. They put 4 different things under each one, but the best we could pull together from county level data was 3. They're not always the same, but they have the same kind of priorities. We got as close as we could. So for some smaller counties, there can be a lot of bouncing around year to year. Some of these indicators, child deaths, teen pregnancies, if you're in a county that doesn't have very many people, one pregnancy, one death can take you from being number 1 to being, number 80. So there's a lot of volatility in those. But for counties like us, Madison and Davidson, Shelby, the ones with a lot more people, there's a lot more steadiness to where we end up. So I know when this was being put together and we're saying, oh, Madison County's 95th, and that's a tough place to be. And we thought, oh, well, were they doing a lot better before? Was this a real big change? But the truth is, Madison County's been in the 90s for a while. Davidson County's been in the 90s for a while. Shelby County's been in the 90s for a while. I know how you feel because last year Davidson County was 95th and I didn't like it either. And now I think we're like 92nd. I mean, it wasn't a big move. So some of the things that we look at in economic well-being, we look at the child poverty rate. That tends to be higher in metropolitan areas, though certainly some rural counties have a very high child poverty rate, but metropolitan areas tend to sit at pretty high there. These are things that are hard to push with county level policy. Sometimes it's just that, hey, we're looking at it. Though the enormous investment that you guys have coming up nearby with Blue Oval City is going to improve that. But the thing that it will hurt is the housing cost, because that's the other one. You kind of have to compare how much money are we all making versus how much does it cost to live. It's really hard to get a good cost of living estimate at the county level because there's a lot of things involved: taxes and housing cost and food cost and childcare. But we look at housing costs, which is something the Casey Foundation looks at nationally, and it's a little expensive here. Not as bad as some places, but most of the urban counties are like that. I mean, the housing costs more here. And lately, that's just getting worse. And while you guys are going to get a big economic investment with Blue Oval City, I bet the housing costs it's going to show there too. Median household income should improve though. You guys are kind of in the middle there. So it's not like Madison County is a super poor county, but it's probably still really expensive and difficult for people to meet the costs of living in a city who are below the median household income. If you're up on the upper end, not so bad. Education, you know, we're all challenged in education. The collar counties around Nashville do the best because they have a lot of money. But reading proficiency, even in the strongest counties, is below 50%. It is not something for any county in the state to brag around too much, though it's that way nationally. They set standards for us. They said we want to be at this level, and that's just not where we are. So hopefully, and you know, kudos to Governor Lee and Penny Schwinn and the state legislature. They just put $1 billion new a year into education. So I'm very hopeful that we'll see the results of that. Yay! So you guys, graduation rate's a little low. Again, that's, you know, you're right there with Shelby, right there with Davidson. Some of the things, we have a page, the third page on these that we didn't put up here, that has some basic policy ideas for the areas where the county has the most challenges. But you guys have on your program today many more people who are looking at detailed things that are happening in Madison County and detailed policy ideas. So we didn't put that up there, and we're going to leave all that to them to discuss. I'm just kind of running through the data. Health, we look at the percentage of children who have health insurance. We look at child and teen deaths, and we look at low birth weight babies. There's been some discussion of this nationally. Low birth weight babies race is a factor in most of these. Most of the time when you separate these by race, there's a clear division. But low birth weight babies is one of the worst. There was a quote from someone in Alabama or Mississippi recently who said, well, if you just look at the white families, our low birth weight rate isn't so bad. So, well, that may be so, but those are not all the families we have. So low birth weight is an issue, and I have so many times thought if we could, as with many, if we could just get rid of the disparity, the number itself would improve so much. So, and then in family and community, we look at teen birth rate. That's one of the ones we had to change because of data issues. So it's not exactly the same. We used to look at pregnancies among teens, and now this year we were looking at pregnancies among unmarried women. School suspension rate, Madison County's high. And I can say, as someone who has two boys who were uber preemies and have IEPs and all kinds of challenges, that one of mine got suspended in pre-K, and I thought that was the most useless thing anyone had ever done. You know, I mean, we tried to do right by it. We made him stay home and do chores, you know, but he was 5. He didn't know what was going on. So it's a hard line to walk between, and discipline is important and improvement is needed and what is useful. And I don't like to pretend that no kids have any issues, they're not causing trouble in the classroom. I'm not gonna lie, my son that got suspended, routinely they had to take the whole classroom out of the room because he would get angry and throw chairs. So it's not like he wasn't trouble. It's not like it was easy to fix, you know, but out of school suspension has no data to back it up. Taking kids out of school and putting them in whatever their home situation is, supervised or not, depending on what their parents can do, it is just doesn't have positive outcomes. So I'm not to say discipline's not important. I'm not to say some kids aren't trouble, because my kids are trouble, but there's got to be a better way. So, okay. And substantiated cases of abuse and neglect. You guys actually look good there, though I did have some pushback on this. We had a discussion about it in our in our group when we were doing this, is because on each of these we have to decide whether is it a good thing if it's high or a good thing if it's low. Your first take is abuse and neglect. Of course, it's a good thing if it's low. Though sometimes your rate is not reflective of what's actually happening. It depends on how much is reported and how much is investigated and how thorough those investigations are. So there's a lot to dig into there. In the end, we decided low is good because we were not going to put abuse and neglect in here and say high is good. But it's a complex number, and that is not always super reflected just in the fact that it's low. So those are the main things. We have this other page where we put pretty much everything that we have at the county level and allow you to look and see where your county is. But just remember that counties are part of the state. We all move up and down together. And those of us that sit at the bottom all the time, it's that way in every state. If you look at our population and our demographics, that's where we are and that's what happens. And also on our policy page, we talk about the fact that it doesn't have to be government programs that are addressing this. Private, public-private partnerships, nonprofit, anywhere and everywhere. And I know Madison County has a lot of good things going on there. And that's what we're here to talk about today. And I'm going to get out the way.
Thanks, Rose, and I hope you all can see why I wanted to keep her super close. So when you guys have any questions during, we're going to be with you all day. So if you have a specific data question, Rose can answer it. If you have a general question, I'm certainly more than happy to take a run at it. Last thing I do want to say is I just really do want to thank Matt Marshall and his leadership in putting day together, all of the partners who came to do this. We do say sometimes Melissa McGee on our staff, Jerry and Dana, Roger, who is a TCCY alumni. We will often sit around a table and we will say, Melissa will often say, we are some very special unicorns that work at the commission. We're enough nerdy that this stuff really excites us. So I can't tell you how much it warms my heart to see something that is as data heavy, as number heavy, really lead someone and a community to say, we want to learn more about this. We can do better for our children, youth, and families. And the first step is getting together and talking about it. So it makes me really happy to see something that we help develop have that kind of impact in a city and county that I love so much. So again, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Matt, I apologize for talking too long, and I really will shut up now.